Welcome to the Between Stories, a series where I take you into the in-between chapters that echo through everything you hear on the show. All right, sorry about this look. I just got back from a run, but this is happening now. Otherwise, it won't happen. The story you're about to hear is one that I share in a lot of my talks with climate audiences. I often share this story of this moment when I had a massive realization while I was working at the White House and how it just shifted my perspective on everything in climate and the climate movement. So, without further ado, here you go. It was sometime after midnight when it hit me. I was alone at my desk on the White House campus. Even at 3 a.m., someone would usually be around. You could walk the vast halls at almost any time and see lights on, people hunched over desks, still grinding. The place never really slept. But this night, it happened to just be me, a blinking cursor, and a mountain of polling data on public opinion that refused to make sense. We'd been doing everything we could to advance climate policy forward, and we were facing tremendous obstruction from Congress. I kept staring at crosstabs, like if I squinted hard enough, I'd get it. Because here's what the data was telling me. The majority of Americans across party lines believed climate change was real. They believed it was serious. They believed we should do something about it. And on our end, we had the science. We had the solutions. A president committed to climate action and a broad coalition of brilliant teams across the White House working to deliver real climate progress. So why the hell were we facing so much obstruction? And that's when an epiphany shot through me. You can't get systemic change without policy. You can't get policy without the people. But here was my realization. You can't get the people until they feel something. I remember sitting back in my chair like I'd been hit. I felt really dumb in that moment. I'd never considered the idea that what we could do in the halls of the White House could come down to a human feeling. What if the theory of change for social action wasn't about persuasion or facts or figures, but about emotion? Fear, guilt, and shame had been one of the primary narrative drivers of the environmental movement. And clearly something wasn't working. For so long, our strategy had been to sound the alarm. Dire warnings, apocalyptic timelines, 12 years left. They thought urgency would motivate people into long-term action. It made rational sense. Instead, we were teaching people to give up. The grim facts mattered, but the way we leaned on them in the mainstream narrative as our primary tool to drive action seemed to be backfiring. Suddenly, the stagnation within the climate movement made perfect, painful sense. Because really, why would anyone fight for a future they believe is already lost? Years later came the Patagonia film. During the film tour, I went into every event thinking all the questions I'd get would be about climate change. Instead, someone would stand up and ask something like, "How do you stay hopeful when things seem so dark?" Or, "How has your mental health journey informed your approach?" It caught me completely off guard. After one night on the tour, I was sitting in my hotel room at midnight, scrolling through my notes from the event. Nearly every question had been about hope, mental health, or finding purpose amid struggle. Not a single person asked about climate. I realized something was happening across the country, We weren't just in a mental health crisis, we were in a crisis of hope. I typed out a sentence and just sat there with it staring back at me. You can't save anything if you can't save yourself. Lately, I've been facing the reality that I'm struggling to find it myself. I have friends having children in a world that at times feels on fire. And I can't tell them, yes, everything is fine. But then I remember that we've been here before. When a wave of progress breaks and the undertow pulls us back again, it's devastating and familiar. And maybe that's exactly the point. That this was never going to be a straight line. Perhaps what keeps us going isn't certainty or strategy or even clarity. Without hope, nothing moves. Not the policy, not the people, nothing. Maybe hope isn't what we expect. It's not something you wait for, not something that strikes you when the world lets you have it. Hope is a skill, a muscle, something you practice, something that gets stronger every time you tap into it. And right now, in this moment, with everything we know about what's coming and everything we know about what's possible, I don't think hope is naive. In fact, hope might be one of the most rational responses there is. Because I have to remind myself, what we're living through right now isn't a final act. The story of climate change isn't over, not even close. And how it ends depends entirely on whether we can remember that we're still the ones writing it. All right. So that story is largely about kind of my theory of change evolving in real time based on this one epiphany I had while I was at my desk very late at night. I straight up just like felt super dumb, you guys. Like, I don't know if you ever felt that in a job you're doing. I felt that in most jobs I'm doing, but I was just like, oh, duh. And Nathaniel and I talked about in the last episode. If you heard that, if you haven't, highly recommend. It really goes alongside this story. But rationality isn't the answer. Like, we think we can just give people the facts. Hey, this is what's happening. This is what it's going to look like. X, Y, Z. Like, I could just list it out, give you numbers. This is how much it's going to cost us. This is how many people are going to die. Rationality isn't a really effective way to convince people a lot of the time. We're often not even rational beings to begin with. Nathaniel talks about that extensively. We're super social, we're super emotional, and we often make decisions in ways we're not aware of based on those things. Part of my work at the White House was realizing like there were people who were better at it and smarter at it than me. And where I was starting to feel needed or pulled was working externally. Because, for example, if we can get the right electeds into office, then that enables policy people to do their job. If we can get the public more motivated on climate action because they believe it can be solved, then that ultimately gives policy people a space to do what they do. And so my theory of change really started there where like the last step in order to like truly fix it is going to be policy and government action, but we need to do everything we can to support the ecosystem that enables people to do that. And that's really become my focus on climate. More and more, I've started to believe that if we can get the narrative right, then a lot of other things follow. The narrative on everything. In order to get policy, you need an effective narrative. In order to get climate candidates elected, you need a good narrative. In order to get people motivated, They have to believe change is possible. That's through a narrative. And so I started looking back at research papers and research around fear, guilt, and shame. And what I started recognizing, if you want to motivate people into long term action, into being a part of a social movement, fear, guilt, and shame is usually not where we'd start, period. There's this realization that we kind of had to start at the beginning that this overlapped with mental health and climate anxiety and climate guilt and climate shame and all these other things people are grappling with. And it's how can we apply that really good research to climate so that we can get this right the first time. Did my mic turn off? No, it didn't. Okay. And so that's the story of, how the villain in me was born, where I was like, oh, fuck this. Like, let's change strategy. We really want to think about how we can make the climate movement more inclusive, more open, and more accessible to people, right? That's the goal. So a lot of that can come down to how are we building community? What are the emotions we're instilling in the public? What is the narrative we have? What role do people play? Are they feeling empowered? Do they feel hopeful? You have to believe that you have agency. And that's why I did this whole past episode with Nathaniel Stinnett of the Environmental Voter Project. God, that organization understands narratives more than anyone. And what I like about this, because they're focused on elections and therefore the policy that comes out of that, they're working to solve climate change for everybody, not just a few people. And that's what it comes down to, right? When we look at systemic change, policy, government action, like things that scale, elections are crucial to that. That's the goal here. So, one, human emotion, it's important. Don't negate that and consider whether emotions make you motivated, excited, empowered, or whether they make you paralyzed. Those are important considerations. Of course, there's nuance. Not everything is an absolute, but we really want to think about this. Two, hope works. It's not just a nice thing. It doesn't just feel good. It's effective. Three, on that note, everything comes down to people's sense of agency. We need to give them agency. Where I send people is one, focus on systemic change. Obviously, vote. That's the baseline. Vote in every election, vote up and down the ballot. But if you want to get more involved, groups like the Environmental Voter Project, I believe, are the answer to climate change. This is a group that's not just like chipping away at it, they are fixing it because policy can fix these things. All right. Thanks everybody for being here. I'll see you in the next episode.